It is probably June 4th when you're watching this. Now, we don't have time for a theme song today because there is a lot of misinformation out there these days. And of course, most of that misinformation comes from the right, but some of it comes from the left. And on this show, we try to call out the people, not only who we disagree with, and of course that's more fun, calling out Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, for instance, but calling out those we agree with is just as important. So I would call out Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, all these different left-wing individuals, and as a result, I will call out left-wing media sources as well. And there was a really huge left-wing, I'm not going to call it a lie, but I will say that there was a huge left-wing movement, especially on the far left, that claimed that Joe Biden, when elected, would push for austerity politics. Now, what is austerity? Austerity is basically a form of politics that tries to decrease budget deficits. So what that means is generally an increase in tax revenue, done in multiple different ways. Sometimes it's an increase in capital gains tax, increase in income tax. Sometimes it's an increase in payroll tax, which tends to affect the poor, and a decrease in federal spending. A lot of times that comes from a decrease in entitlements, entitlements being Social Security and Medicare, at least in the United States, and a decrease in discretionary spending, for instance, defense spending, or spending on transfer payments being a way to say welfare without saying welfare. And generally, a decrease in spending tends to also hurt the poor in a variety of different ways, because it tends to be that the poor benefit the most from Medicare, Medicaid, and from Social Security. And as well, the poor tends to benefit from things like WIC, things like SNAP, these various federal programs that help subsidize basically the lifestyle of most poor people when their income can't necessarily provide the same thing that the government can. So, austerity is generally, among progressives, a negative economic policy. And even among most mainstream economists, they generally believe that, yes, austerity is actually bad economics. Now, that has changed recently. There are some economists who claim that perhaps austerity could be a good thing. It was especially big in the 2010s, and probably even a little bit before that. But austerity now is extremely disliked among most economists. So this brings me to Joe Biden and what people have been saying about Joe Biden, at least before this new budget came out. So there was a very big portion of the left that claimed that Joe Biden, if elected, would push austerity. And even there were discussions of that the left would have to push Joe Biden left on issues regarding austerity, regarding the budget, regarding trying to create more spending. And it seemed as if, from the left's perspective, that Joe Biden would pursue austerity in a variety of different ways. Some said, which was actually crazy at the time, like legitimately get locked up in saying it was that bad, that Joe Biden would cut Social Security, which is basically obviously not on the cards for a Biden administration. It's not even on the cards for a Republican administration at this point, because Social Security is such a third rail in American politics, it really can't be touched. So this claim that Joe Biden would cut Social Security, that was big in January of 2020, and it was even big in the sort of, I'm going to call them bad faith attacks throughout the entirety of the general election from leftists who claim that Joe Biden was a right-winger. This may seem crazy and insane to some people who weren't on Twitter at the time. In fact, I wasn't on Twitter at the time, so it did kind of seem insane to me when I first heard it. But I heard it from a variety of different people on the left, like Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, and frankly, I don't watch Kyle Kulinski anymore. I think I watched him as my primary Bernie supporting news. This was at the time where I was in college and I didn't have time to watch a Sam Cedar or even a David Pakman, because if I wanted smart analysis, I would be reading a book, but I didn't want smart analysis, I wanted quick analysis, and of course that made me turn to someone like Kyle Kulinski, and eventually I found other left-wing media sources like Krystal Ball. And when I say left-wing, I don't mean on the left, I mean leftist media sources, as in people who are so left that they really don't care if the right wins. It's a very weird segment of the online left. But to be fair, it's a mostly online phenomenon. Regardless, it seems as if they claim that austerity would be the method of the Joe Biden administration, and it just wasn't true. So, as we discussed last week, Joe Biden is pushing a $6 trillion, with a T, dollar budget. That is huge. That is amazing, especially when you think of, number one, the $1.9 trillion spending package that just came out. That spending package was called the American Rescue Plan. Now you have the American Jobs Plan beginning to come, and the American Jobs Plan is sometimes called the Biden Infrastructure Bill. And this budget is just another reminder that no, Joe Biden is not planning austerity, because of course he wasn't, and he was never planning austerity. So the other important thing to note is that it wasn't just like these online leftists who, I understand their primary method, the reason why they exist is to make money, and a lot of that money can be made by claiming that Joe Biden is terrible, and by sort of, I'm not going to say grifting, because I'm not going to use that word, because I do believe that they believe what they say, but I do think that there is an unhealthy quality among people on the left, where, and on the right, and frankly in the center, where they go more and more extreme in their beliefs in order to chase, in order to chase clicks and to chase money. That is absolutely fine in my book. I think that that's okay, and I think that they do that. I don't really know how you can argue against that, but I'm not claiming that, number one, that the center doesn't do it, or that the center left doesn't do it, but it is true that that is done, right? If you look at early to mid to late, it almost always is more and more extreme. Now, the one person who I think doesn't do this is Kyle Kulinski, as I mentioned. I think he was probably the same in 2008. I never watched him, but perhaps he was. And, well, I think he voted for Obama in 2008, so that might not be true. But regardless, the point that I'm making here is that a large portion of the left, frankly, lied about Joe Biden. And, frankly, they also lied about the political state of the country. And that is a problem because, number one, I get that populists, and that's probably the best way to put it, left populists, that left populists have to sort of continue to push this elite versus the people mindset, which that is not real political analysis, to be very clear. If you talk about the elites and the populists, that's just not real political analysis. Perhaps I'll change on that at some point, but right now that just seems almost completely silly to me to really claim that. Instead, you might want to call out the rich, you might want to call out the 1%, you might want to call out a variety of different people, but just saying elites just makes that, it makes that criticism fall flat. It's not even real Marxist criticism, which at least I'd respect. It's just unusable, because it's not real. So, that sort of populist left has sort of lied about Joe Biden, and now no one's apologizing for it, which I find weird, because Joe Biden is not doing austerity like they said that he would. I may not have mentioned this, I don't think I did, but this was actually, this idea for this segment came to me from a recent Jacobin article. When I say recent, I mean February 2021, so not that recent, called "The Left Has Slightly Loosened the Cold Grip of Austerity Under President Biden." And I say this because Jacobin itself published "The Last Thing the Economy Needs is Joe Biden's Austerity" during the November election. So it seems almost silly to say that, because austerity was never considered by President Biden. And we know this because President Biden, he appointed two nominees to the Council of Economic Advisors, Heather Boushey and Jared Bernstein, who are economic progressives, and he nominated, as we mentioned in a very earlier episode of the show, Cecilia Rouse from Princeton, who may not be a progressive in the economic sense, but she is at least an economic liberal, definitely on the side of the left more than the side of austerity politics. So it was basically true for the longest time that austerity was never happening. But yet, constantly you heard from the left that Joe Biden would push austerity if he came into office. But we see right now, with this $1.9 trillion spending package that just passed, the $6 trillion budget that will pass probably, and this addition of infrastructure into this budget reconciliation bill, that will definitely It should, definitely. I'm not going to say it will, because you still will have people like Jimmy Dore and Briahna Joy Grey saying that Joe Biden is literally killing millions of poor people. But you are probably going to see the death of austerity under President Biden. You're probably going to see a resurgence of corruption or something else. But it's not going to be austerity, because austerity has been doomed to fail, and it will continue to fail as long as it is pushed. And it's not being pushed. Either by the left and, frankly, by the right, because, as we discussed, austerity is raising taxes, which the right doesn't seem willing to do. Maybe if you count the SALT deductions, we'll see that in the future. So, we will continue to cover progressive media screw-ups, the failure of austerity, and the Joe Biden administration. And frankly, this is really shocking, but all you have to do to learn more is to subscribe to In Progress on YouTube. And you can tell me whether you agree. Was progressive media right to claim Joe Biden would commit the cardinal sin of austerity politics? Well, with the collapse of the public option, maybe. And we'll cover the public options advanced through laboratories of democracy next.